Do you understand what would happen to this beautiful shining castle, this pearl of the East, this tree of life planted in the living waters of life itself, if the soul were to fall into grave error? No darkness is deeper than this, no blackness is more opaque. Although the same sun that has given the soul all her brilliance and beauty still shines at her center, it is as if the soul herself is no longer there to experience it. The soul is innately as capable of sharing this divine light as a crystal is in reflecting the radiance of the sun. Nothing much helps the soul in a state of grave error. Any good works she may try to do are fruitless. She will gain no glory through them. If virtue is true virtue, its source is in God. A soul in grave error has separated herself from God, and so her deeds are worthless. After all, a person who has fallen into grave error is interested in pleasing the spirit of evil, not God, and so the poor soul becomes the essence of darkness itself. I know a certain person to whom God wanted to demonstrate what happens when a soul falls into grave error. This same person now believes that if only people really understood this, they would go to great lengths to avoid such occasions. May you, friends, share in this person's ardent desire for understanding. May the Beloved give you, as the Beloved has given her, the urge to pray fervently for other souls who are in this state, who have become sheer darkness, and whose deeds are just as dark. All streams flowing forth from a clear spring are also clear. So it is with a soul in grace. Planted like a tree in the spring of life, her deeds delight both the human and the divine. If it were not for this spring sustaining the tree and keeping it from drying up, there would be no cool shade, no sweet fruit. If the soul purposely pulls up her roots from the source and plants herself where the waters are polluted and smelly, nothing but misery and filth will flow forth from her. This fountainhead that shines like the sun from the center of the soul never loses its radiance. It is ever present within the soul, and nothing can diminish its beauty. But obviously, if we were to drape a dark cloth over a crystal sitting in the sunshine, no matter how brightly the sun shines, it will have no effect on the shrouded jewel. O soul set free by the blood of Christ, learn to understand yourselves. Have compassion for yourselves. With self-awareness, how could you not strive to lift the dark veil that darkens the crystal of your soul? If your life were to end right now, you would never again be given to enjoy this light. Oh, Jesus! It is so sad to see a soul separated from this light. What a wretched state the chambers of the castle have fallen into. How disturbed are the faculties of sense and reason that inhabit them. These are the servants of the place. They have grown blind and badly behaved. But if a tree is planted in the spirit of evil, what other kind of fruit could it possibly bear? I once heard a wise man say that it was not the things that a soul in grave error did, but rather what she did not do. May God in mercy deliver us from such wickedness. Nothing in this life deserves the name evil but this, which carries everlasting negativity in its wake. We must live alert to unconsciousness, friends, and pray to God to protect us against it. If God does not guard our city, then all our work is in vain. We are vanity itself. That woman I mentioned said that she received 2 blessings from the gift the Beloved gave her. One blessing was an intense reluctance to offend God. Having learned the perils of unconsciousness, she begged endlessly not to let her fall. The other blessing was that she discovered a mirror for humility inside herself, which reflected the truth that none of our good works has its source in ourselves, but flow instead from the sacred spring where this tree that is the soul is planted, and the divine sun that gives warmth to everything we do. She said this because it became so clear to her that whenever she did anything good or observed a good thing done, she immediately recalled the source and understood that without it, we are powerless. And so she would begin to spontaneously praise God, and she never gave a second thought to herself. If we come away with these 2 blessings, friends, then neither the time you have spent in reading this nor I in writing it will have been wasted. Men of learning act like they get theology without much effort, but we women know to take it all in slowly and muse on it. We need to feel it. And so, if it be God's will, perhaps a few metaphors will capture our attention and bring some understanding. These inner teachings are so obscure to the mind. Someone with as little learning as I have will end up saying countless superfluous and even irrelevant things in order to make a single meaningful point. Please have patience with me, dear reader, as I must cultivate patience with myself in writing of things I know almost nothing about. Because, really, sometimes I grab pen and paper like an utter fool. I have no idea whatsoever how I am going to begin and what I am going to say. I fully understand how important it is for me to do my best to try to impart something useful to you about the inner life. We are always hearing about what a good thing prayer is, and we seekers are obligated to engage in it for so many hours a day, but all we are told is what we ourselves are supposed to do. What about the work the Beloved does inside us, the supernatural work? Nobody explains that part. It will be comforting to ponder the celestial palace within ourselves as we explore and explain the path of prayer. So few mortals understand this sacred place, although many pass through it. The Beloved may have given me some clarity about certain things I have written about in the past, but there are other, more difficult matters I have not really begun to understand until now. The trouble is that, because of my own limitations, I cannot get to these mysteries without first going over what is already known. Let's get back to the mansion of many dwellings. Don't picture these dwellings as arranged in a row, one after the other. Instead, turn your eyes to the center, which is the part of the palace where the sovereign lives. Imagine a palmetto fruit. Layer upon layer must be peeled away to reach the tasty part in the middle. So it is with the interior castle. Many rooms surround the central chamber. Always visualize your soul as vast, spacious, and plentiful. The amplitude is impossible to exaggerate. The soul's capacity far transcends our imagining. The sun at the center of this place radiates to every part. It is very important for any soul who practices prayer, whether a little or a lot, not to limit herself or hold herself back in a designated corner. Since God has given her such dignity, let her roam freely through all the dwellings above, below, and to each side. She must not feel compelled to linger too long in any one place, unless, of course, it is the dwelling of self-knowledge. How necessary this abode is, even for those whom the Beloved has drawn into the same chamber where the Beloved abides. No matter how high a state the soul attains, she can never neglect knowing herself, even if she wanted to. Humility is always busy working, like a bee making honey in its hive. Without humility, all is lost. Remember, though, the bee continually goes out to gather more nectar from the flowers, and so the soul must fly sometimes from knowledge of herself to reflect on the majesty and greatness of her God. Aloft, she will recognize her own lowliness more clearly than if she were only to ponder her own nature. Plus, she will be freer from the serpents that invade those first chambers of self-knowledge. Even though it is by the grace of God that the soul practices knowing herself, you can, as the saying goes, have too much of a good thing. Believe me, reflecting on the virtue of God will carry us to much greater heights than if we were to tie ourselves down to our own little land of misery. I'm not sure I have explained this well. Self-knowledge is so important that I do not care how high you are raised up to the heavens. I never want you to cease cultivating it. As long as we are on this earth, there is nothing more essential than humility. Enter the room of self-knowledge first, instead of floating off to the other places. This is the path. Traveling along a safe and level road, who needs wings to fly? Let's make the best possible use out of our feet first, and learn to know ourselves. And yet it seems to me that we will never know ourselves unless we seek to know God. Glimpsing greatness, we recognize our own powerlessness. Gazing upon purity, we notice where we are impure. Pondering humility, we see how far from humble we are. What do we gain by this shift in perspective? A couple of things. First, it is clear that white seems much brighter against black, and the black appears much darker set against the white. Also, When we turn away from our small selves and towards God, both our understanding and our will become more sublime and more inclined to embrace all that is good. We would do ourselves a great disservice if we never endeavored to rise above the mud of our own personalized misery. Remember how murky and noxious are the streams that flow from the soul in grave error? It's a bit like that. If we are perpetually stuck in our own acre of tribulation, our stream will never flow free from the mire of fear and faint-heartedness. Are they looking at me or not? We would be wondering. Will everything go wrong with me if I take this path? What's a wretched little person like me doing engaging in something as lofty as prayer? Won't I be perceived as superior if I don't follow the road everyone else is on? Extremes are no good, we would reason, even extremes in virtue, and since I'm such a sinner, my fall would be even more catastrophic. Besides, I doubt I'd make any progress anyway, and I'm likely to just cause trouble to good people. Someone like me doesn't need to make herself into anything special. Oh God, help me, friends! How many souls has the spirit of evil ruined in this way? They confuse those fears with humility. These fears arise not from knowing ourselves. Fear distorts knowledge of self. What we should really be afraid of is obsessing over ourselves and never getting free of ourselves. And so I say, my friends, let us set our eyes on Christ, our good, and on his saints. That is where we will learn true humility. Then our understanding will be enhanced. Then self-knowledge will not make us timid and cowardly. Even though this is only the first dwelling of the interior castle, it is so rich and precious that the soul who can slip away from the serpents that slither in there cannot help but advance. The spirit of evil uses many nasty tricks to keep souls from knowing themselves and understanding their own paths. I speak from experience when I tell you about this first dwelling. There aren't just a few rooms, there are millions. There are many ways for the soul with all the best intentions to get into trouble. But the intentions of the spirit of evil are always bad. And so in each room, legions of evil spirits have been set up to beat back souls who try to pass from one room to the next. The poor souls who do not know about this fall for 1,000 deceptions. The farther they travel away from the spirit of evil, and the nearer they approach the innermost dwelling of the beloved, the less likely they are to be tricked. But souls in these first rooms are still attached to the world, still engulfed by their own pleasures and ambitions. The faculties of sense and reason, which God gave to the soul to be of service to her, may not be strong enough to combat certain forces. Some souls could be easily conquered here, even though they may do good works and be motivated by a sincere desire not to offend the beloved. Those who find themselves in this state should turn towards majesty as often as possible. They should call upon the Blessed Mother and all the saints to intercede on their behalf, since the servants of their own nature lack the power to defend them. The truth is, it is necessary at every single stage to draw what we need from God. May the Beloved in mercy give us strength. Amen. How miserable this life can be. I've gone on here and elsewhere about the ways we do damage to ourselves by failing to cultivate humility and self-awareness. Enough! Just remember, it is your most important task. Please, God, may I have said something of benefit by now. You will probably notice that the light from the king's innermost chamber seems to barely reach these first outer rooms. They are not murky, as they are when the soul is darkened by a state of grave error, but the soul herself is prevented from seeing the light. Oh, I wish I knew how to explain myself. There is nothing wrong with this dwelling. It's just that those nasty creatures, like serpents and vipers and poisonous reptiles, creep into the soul and do not let her perceive the radiance. It is as if a person were to go into a room filled with sunshine, but she had dirt in her eyes and could hardly open them. This dwelling is actually bright, but the soul cannot appreciate it, because these wild beasts here make her close her eyes to everything but them. It is not that the soul is in a wicked state. It is that she is still so immersed in things of the world, still so caught up in the possessions, or honor, or business affairs, that even though she may long to gaze upon the beauty of the interior castle, all these attachments distract her from doing so. She cannot seem to extricate herself from so many entanglements. But anyone who wishes to move ahead on the path must try to give up unnecessary objects and preoccupations. If you want to reach the innermost chamber, this is your only hope. Start now. Even if you have already entered the castle, you are still in danger. Among all those venomous creatures, you cannot avoid being bitten at some point. What about people like us, friends, who have already freed ourselves from worldly attachments? What if we have already succeeded in entering deep into the secret dwelling within the castle of our souls, and then, through our own fault, turn back toward chaos? Because of our imperfections, many of us who have been blessed by God fall back into a wretched state. We may live free from certain external involvements, but may God please grant us internal freedom as well. Guard yourselves, my friends, against matters beyond your control. Remember that evil spirits battle us throughout the kingdom. It is true that in some areas our faculties serve as our protectors and are strong enough to fight for our souls, but sometimes the spirit of evil disguises itself as an angel of light to deceive us. We cannot be too careful. If we do not remain conscious, the spirit of evil will sneak in and, like silent sandpaper, will gradually cause damage in all kinds of insidious little ways we may not even realize until it is too late. For example, say the spirit of evil compels a certain sister to do endless penance. The only time she is at peace is when she is tormenting herself. Maybe the initial impulse towards self-mortification is pure, but it grows distorted. If her spiritual teacher has instructed that no one involve herself in those kind of austerities without guidance, but the sister believes she knows better and so engages secretly in such extremes anyway, compromising her health so that she becomes incapable of engaging in spiritual practice, then where has this seemingly good thing led her? Maybe another sister suffers from a zeal for absolute perfection. Fundamentally, this is a fine thing, but it could lead her to see every little fault in her friends as some serious transgression. She would be constantly on the lookout for other people's shortcomings and would be running to their spiritual guide to inform on them at every opportunity. This zeal could blind her to her own faults and alienate her friends who, resentful of her tendency to criticize, may not appreciate that it arose from a worthy impulse toward perfection. Do not underestimate the spirit of evil here. Its aim is to undermine charity and cool the love the friends have for one another. This would cause serious harm. Let's understand, my friends, that true perfection means loving God and loving our neighbor. The more perfectly we keep these two commandments, the closer to perfection we will come. All spiritual rules are nothing but means toward the end of spiritual love. Forget about reckless zeal. It can do harm. Let each one of us look to herself. I do not want you to ever forget how important is the love between us. If you are going around looking at other people's faults, you might mistake insignificant things for drastic imperfections. This not only ruins your own serenity, but unnecessarily disturbs other people's peace of mind. Perfection, at what price? The spirit of evil might even tempt our spiritual guides, which is all the more dangerous. Such a situation requires discretion. If the teacher herself breaks important spiritual rules, the kindest thing would be to call upon someone of higher station and prevail upon them to gently intervene. The same is true for one of the friends. Failing to deal with a problem out of fear of yielding to a negative temptation may in itself be yielding to a negative temptation. Still, it is important to remember that the spirit of evil has all kinds of tricks to deceive us. Cultivating the habit of gossip is one of them. Don't talk about each other's faults behind each other's backs. For the greatest benefit, discuss these matters face to face. Around here, glory to God, We don't have much opportunity for harmful chatter since we keep almost continual silence. But it is good to stay conscious of this tendency.